Well, good morning and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Community Foundation's Coffee Talks. We are thrilled to have you with us today on this Cinco de Mayo. Many of you I've heard, or some of you are doing Giving Day Tuesday, so thank you for taking time out of your morning to join us for this conversation. I'm going to actually turn this over to Ashley this morning, and Ashley's going to host today's edition of Coffee Talks. Ashley?
Good morning, everybody. So I'm happy to bring to you our lead pastor, Tyler Hartford. Tyler's with Pleasant View Church. I've worked closely with Tyler through the COAD. Tyler's going to give you a little bit of background on the COAD, but Tyler has some really insightful information on what it looks like to reopen our faith-based communities, as well as, just as a nonprofit as a whole. So some really interesting information. I'd love for you guys to pick Tyler's brain. He's a plethora of information. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tyler.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here with you. If you want, you can put your name and email on the side if I haven't met you before and you'd like to be in conversation later. I'm going to keep things moving because I want to give space for people to just ask questions. I'm sure a lot of people have just chimed in, not sure what to expect, or even maybe some questions of their own that I don't address. There's a three-pronged approach I'm going to give. I'm going to give an introduction to the COAD, particularly the emotional spiritual team. I'm going to give just a quick snapshot on challenges for faith communities and then opportunities for faith communities. First of all, I'm going to start sharing my screen. I'll kind of go through that real quick, and then we'll come back to the videos here. If you have questions that pop up during that time, feel free to put them in the chat window, and we'll manage those when I'm done with the brief slideshow. Okay, so can everyone see this title page? And we'll go forward. Let's see. COAD is made up of, it's called Community Organizations Assisting with Disaster. It's multiple teams that address such issues as food insecurity, housing, communication, volunteer activation. These are organizations that already exist that come together to leverage their resources in times something like usually like a tornado, or it actually began in the Elkhart County around the flood. It has not been activated very often. It's still ironing out things. It's still working through how some processes work. Of course, we don't think about things that are needed during emergencies until we have an emergency. So thankful that Elkhart County has something like this. The conversations that come out of these organizations are not just related to the COAD, but actually create a network of resources that happen beyond just the COAD, as Ashley and I have already shared that we're working together on some other projects. The emotional spiritual COAD team is made up of volunteers that agree to help provide safe resources for clients. So basically what you're saying is when an organization is a part of the emotional spiritual COAD, they have some kind of resourcing that is tied back to helping people in those specific areas. As far as the team in this area, right now that team is made up of myself from Pleasant View Church, but also Father Jose from St. John the Evangelist Church, Doug Kripe, he's a pastor at several congregations and a chaplain at Beacon Health, Aliak Deegan of Ryan's Place, Rusty Edwards, who's on the call with us today, chaplain at Basher's. Scott Matthews is of River Oaks, their plant in Elkhart. And then Rebecca Shetler-Fast joins us often. Some of you may know her through the work at The Source. She's been a tremendous resource to us. And then Christine Schaubert is the chair of all the COAD teams. Ashley works with volunteer activation team. We have a communication team. I know we also have a team that's worked with housing and food insecurity. Basically, our team is working towards some short response ideas. We're still coming up with projects and ideas that can encourage the community. Some of those things include perhaps a video of faith leaders that will just offer words of hope and joy for the congregation, for the community. And then also looking at a Facebook page that's going to be launching here this week or so that will have insightful or positive posts that will come out on a regular basis. The long-term idea or ideas that we're working on is like Ryan's Place is putting together some processes for helping with grief. That can be training seminars for people in the community to lead grief support groups. We're exploring the idea of a county-wide warm line. I didn't finish that line in there, but basically it's a peer-to-peer situation where a person can call in and just talk with somebody who can just be an active listener. That takes the pressure off of the crisis hotlines that wind up needing to do more intervention type of work. Those are just some ideas that we're working at. All of those things obviously take time, and every organization we're working with right now is trying to figure out how to do the new normal right now as well. Something about the faith community, just to note that we're not used to having our campuses closed. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on Easter. I mean, that's like the holiest place of the Christian faith on Easter. The doors are shut. There's no entry to the place where there's the empty tomb of Christ. The other challenge that faith communities are facing is that leaders are predominantly wired towards caring for people. And we're forced to make decisions that is always going to leave someone unhappy. And it also, in the last 8 weeks or so, we've been kept from seeing the people who need us the most. Personally, some of the hardest things I've had to deal with is people dying and I've not been able to be by their side, family members needing funerals and that's not coming together in ways that bring good closure, people who want to celebrate weddings and so on. It's particularly hard for organizations that are dealing with volunteers because we are purely volunteer based. How does our identity work when we're told that we're really not supposed to be together? I do know that the governor relaxed attendance numbers for religious institutions last Friday. That has caused a tremendous amount of buzz in our circles. He has been urging virtual worship still, but many churches are interpreting that number attendance to be laid out in different ways. I'll cover that in just a minute, but it just feels like there's a wide spectrum of how churches have interpreted the governor's words as to no limit in attendance on a campus with distancing guidelines in place. I do want to note that on this call, I don't want to get into the situation where one group is right or wrong. It's going to roll out. And frankly, we've all kind of needed to have a little bit of grace with each other these days. And navigating has been an interesting conversation last week. I just wanted to note that Barna research discovered that South Bend Elkhart region is the 10th most churched city or region in the United States. Some of you may not know that. So that means 52% of people in our community are connected directly to some kind of religious group, and they meet more than once a month for worship. So that means that there's a lot of people connected to faith communities, but there's also a lot of people who are connected to people who know faith communities. Just bear in mind that the fabric of our community really does, it's represented in these numbers. I've always been fascinated by that. South Bend, Elkhart, the 10th most churched region. So when you think about challenges, I've already referenced some of them. I think about faith is relational. Everything's about relationships. We kind of joke that ministers throw water, rice, and dirt. When we throw water in baptisms, whether it's a child or a teenager or adult, when we throw rice at weddings, when we throw dirt when they're buried, it's everything is in person with other people. I've already referenced the challenges that's meant. The other thing is that we're embodied. So this idea of like water, rice, and dirt means that we're tied to our physical surroundings. When I was on a call recently with a number of pastors, there's about 20 some odd pastors, the Catholic priest says Catholic worship centers around communion. If we can't have communion, what do we do? The Mennonite churches are saying, well, our worship is around song. If we are distanced from people and we can't sing because of projectile droplets, like why bother worshiping? Like what, you know, they worship, but the center of their worship is embodied, right? Like charismatic worship involves laying on of hands, and fundamentalist Baptists might really call for altar calls, where people come down and someone prays over you. Like every aspect is affected by this. And then you think about entry and exits. I mean, you don't go to Menards and shake everybody's hand. You don't go to Menards and huddle together and get cups of coffee and you know, there's so many contact points that are involved in a faith community. The other thing is the activation of volunteers has been very confusing. If we can't get together, then how do you activate? Or how do you tell people that, oh, don't get together for worship, but we need you to get together for this to help the community? That's been something people have really had to sort through. I have some other ideas about that, and I'll let that go until we have a conversation. Another thing that's really been difficult is churches aren't necessarily known for innovation. There are a few, but when it comes to technology, which is also really pricey, it's been a hard pivot for churches, and yet a lot of them have made it and been very creative. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that as well if people have questions. What I want to point out before I go to the opportunities is that we have an opportunity for all of us, not just churches. What are we going to do after or through this? Are we going to learn and adapt? Are we going to take the opportunity that kills 1% of us or 0.1% of us and makes 99.9% of us stronger? Like, is COVID-19 a vaccine for things in our society? Well, we should be asking the question, what are we building? What are we building? What are we teaching other people to build? How are we taking care of people who are building? I just love this quote from Mark Andreessen. If the work you're doing isn't either leading to something being built or taking care of people directly, we failed you, and we need to get you into a position, an occupation, a career where you can contribute to building. This is a huge opportunity for faith communities. First of all, the whole idea of faith relationship. I got into an argument with somebody 3 months ago who said to me, you can't have relationships virtually. Guess what? That guy's having to eat his words, right? Like, you can have relationships virtually. I've met Ashley once in person, but we've had, I don't know how many conversations about meaningful things. Digital connection is being deepened big time in faith communities. Some are resisting it, but there's a lot of things I can talk to you about that if somebody wants to talk about that. It's just some really cool things happening. We need to build into that. This can be a great opportunity. New relationships are being formed. Another thing that I've noticed in this is faith is embodied. So one of the things that I've discovered is, I shared some of this with Ashley, one of the top things that are selling right now in the market are sleep aids, okay? Meditation apps. Like, when you look down through all the crazy things people are doing, the things that are gonna last, they're investing in their body, they're investing in their mental health, they're investing in their sleep, they're investing in their meditation. These are areas that faith communities can really press into and have tools already in place. The activation of volunteers has been happening, and we've really been forced to think about how much we need volunteers. And I know Ashley's even said that some of the businesses not working has really caused the need for the faith community to step out. And I have seen, and many of you can attest to, food drives and mask making, and all kinds of things that we wouldn't normally be doing being activated now. The pivot, creativity is astounding. I don't know about you guys, but I have enjoyed the creativity that I'm starting to see roll out across particularly social media. We got to remember that the printing press, the Radical Reformation, the Jesuit renewal movement, all of those major movements 500 years ago were right in the middle of some of the biggest plagues. The Renaissance period of art in Italy was birthed out of the trauma of the Black Plague era. Artwork, music. They're predicting in LA recording studios to just be booked out when people are allowed to go back out again because of all the creativity that's being unleashed. Even locally, Father Jose over at St. John's has discovered that TikTok, he discovered it three months ago, never even heard of it. He's doing these little short videos. Some of them have over 200,000 views, and they're picking them up all over the place for internet news as the Catholic priest that spreads joy. So we're just seeing some really cool things happening. I've said a lot. I tried to keep it to less than half of our time together. I'm going to stop my share, and I just want to invite people now to let's have some conversation, because we can go deep on a lot of those points, I'm sure.
Tyler, I did have a question come in that as many people reach out to their church for financial support during these hard times, given that you haven't gathered in place, what do you see being the long-term financial impact on the faith community around this type of support?
Okay. Well, the simplest thing will be on my end, I can testify that our budget has dropped by a third. I'm hearing that from a number of churches. I do know of a couple of churches where giving is actually up, and their benefit funds are actually higher than they've ever been. I think it just depends on what kind of people attend your congregation. Mine's pretty much blue collar, middle managers, not a lot of business owners, and we just have, you know, a quarter of our church is 65 and older. Those who are living off of retirement, they're going to have to readjust and figure out how much they're willing to give off of that. So right now, I'm saying that the middle range churches are seeing about a third decline in their budget. I will say that the conversations involve that those first cuts are going to be towards organizations that might be the most removed from their vision or not quite having a working relationship with them. So that will also be a casualty. That said, our congregation hasn't gotten a lot of requests for financial support, because I think most people are looking towards the government agencies right now, but it will come. Actually, I do believe, didn't we heard on a call that there is a system being put in place with about 5 organizations that they're going to test. I can't really say a lot about it yet, but they're going to start sharing information between people, organizations that are giving money, and they're going to have a shared database. And there's an invitation coming out shortly, next few weeks or so, maybe in a month, where churches can join into that network. And so that if they're going to give money towards, say, utilities, they can check with an Elkhart County wide database of how much has already been given. I do know some ministeriums. There's the Middlebury Ministerium, I think at one point had vouchers that they were using. I haven't heard lately, but they would know whether or not extra has been given to a family so that they're not walking around and asking from other churches. That's been a problem we've had in the past, is somebody just working their way through the phone book and asking churches. So I don't know.
How are you guys celebrating and highlighting the creative things that you're doing?
Well, I'll speak for myself. One of the decisions I made early on in the social media world was I would just use a hashtag, people are awesome. I think that there's a lot of opportunities to share our humanity. Father Jose at St. John's has basically said, I'm a cheerleader for joy. And so if you look on YouTube or their Facebook page for their church, they're just constantly looking for 15-second clips of celebrating joy and integrating scripture into that. So those are some things that I did personally what he's done. As far as churches, I've heard a whole range of things. I've heard everything from, I know Napanee Missionary Church is doing every single night, they have a prayer room that's open on Zoom for people to just have a time to get together and pray. They're broken out into other groups if they need to be. Pastor Ray Caples, he also works with juvenile detention. He does a daily blog, just a short little daily blog for his church. He's been getting people like out of the state that call him asking for prayer. So there's lots of ways to celebrate and be creative with it. I have artist friends that have done some really cool things. I got a friend in Annapolis that like at Easter, like put a giant poster out front of her house with this beautiful drawing of the lamb and, you know, Jesus is risen, and just, you know, the artistic people are just going, you know, I got to express myself somehow.
What are some of the surprising ways that faith groups have engaged others relationally?
Well, I mentioned that actually a little bit already, but I will note that again, like, so St. John's, they moved all of their masses online, but they do something every single day. And I want to point out what's really crazy about this is these things that are being done locally are then having like international repercussions. So like Father Jose does all these little catechism classes online, but now he's doing like a youth seminar this week in Honduras because a random priest in Honduras reached out and said, I got 20 young adults that need this kind of input. Would you be willing to spend an hour with them or a couple of hours with them? This Thursday, I'm doing a Bible study with a mission team that is stuck in Belize. So some of those creative ways I just mentioned are actually generating other conversations that then create relationships outside of the group, outside of your local area. Let me think here for a second about some others. I have some notes here. Okay, so if you're of a Christian tradition that has no problem with alcohol, I know that there's a big thing in Zoom where they're doing cocktail hours, virtual cocktail hours. And I know of some churches that are church plants that are doing virtual cocktail hours. And they're getting people chiming in that aren't of faith, that are asking hard questions. And there's actually a phenomenon now of some churches even completely being planted online, where there's community being built through Zoom. So I won't get into a debate about that, but that's maybe one more. A couple of churches have said that they've created virtual family groups. And that has been really great, whether it's through Zoom or through Facebook private groups. And that's been life-giving. And they put out little challenges sometimes, like, hey, why don't you guys film yourself doing this? And they all like become accountable.
Tyler, we did have a question come in that how are you seeing this impacting Sunday school and youth groups locally? My children are 10 and 11 and have really missed the in-person contact, but have appreciated the online opportunities.
You have hit a big one. Okay, so like while there's a wide range of responses to the church opening up even this weekend, I don't know of anyone that has publicly noted that they're going to have children's programming. There may be some, but the most are not. And they're taking their cues from the schools, daycare centers, etc. And a lot of what they're trying to do back into the services is to create some kind of family component of it. I know for us, we're talking about children's stories. We're talking about just like little things to ask them to look for something in the service, to engage them. But that's actually a real problem right now. The side note is, let's just face it, that while youth are the future of the church, unfortunately, for a lot of small churches, the first staffing to go is the youth minister. I'm hearing stories of widespread layoffs or cutbacks. The other challenge, I know I'm not giving you a hopeful thing here, but the other challenge has been universally, I'm hearing from churches that engagement of teenagers through Zoom platforms has gone like the e-learning has jaded them. Like one local church has like 70 kids in their youth group. They have 12 people on their Zoom calls when they do youth night. And so they're having to lean into like drop-offs, like youth minister. My youth minister went to everyone's home and left a gift on their steps and stood at a distance and had a conversation with them. Has done that once because he actually had COVID for 2 weeks and couldn't be out for a month. But now he's back and he's doing that. There's also phone calls. There's more handwritten letters. The old school ways of communicating has actually been resonating among the youth. John?
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick too, another thing that I'm observing is family integration is much tighter, and
Oh, yeah.
that can go in a negative way, but can also be very positive. And we're seeing a lot of teenagers and parent relationships, brothers and sisters that they are connecting, and it's been really good. So that would be another piece that I think is important as churches support through that network.
Yeah, Rusty also mentioned the Zoom games as well. I've seen a number of people going into like the Amazon or what do they call it? The like Quiplash and Fibbage and all that kind of virtual gaming.
Is there a contact point for the church organizations helping with life bills that you could refer people to?
Actually, I'm not aware of one. I actually like, so for utilities, some of them I've sent over towards real services. Our trustee, our township trustee has some funds. It really kind of depends on the context of the person who's asking. As far as an overarching organization, I'm not aware of it. I've actually just been pushing people back to the 211 line at this time. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, that's
I know
why
we're coming up. Oh, sorry, Tyler. I know we're coming up on our 10:30. I do want to make sure that you share with everyone the hand greeting that we were discussing. I think that this is really heartfelt, and for people, you know, like us at the Community Foundation, we're huggers, pizza hugger, Jody's a hugger.
Yeah.
I think that this is something so neat that I would love to see you share with everyone.
Sure, I'll share it now, and I'm still open to talking a little bit further. But so I've had the opportunity to be in some really interesting places. Rural India. I've taught English in Mongolia. I was in Ethiopia for 3 weeks, traveling out in the countryside, and there's just a lot of opportunities to see different ways people greet. Some of them are definitely not quarantine friendly, like all the kissing and touching. But one of the things that stuck with me and is in the Middle East, like in Jordan, Palestine, and in other places where there is a Muslim population and they need to greet somebody, but they're not sure if the person is also Muslim and their hands aren't clean yet. So they do this greeting where they take their right hand and they place it over their heart and they say, "It's so good to see you. It's an honor. It's a blessing. Thank you for your time." Or shalom, In my context, I simply just say it's an international greeting. I do know that tagging something with Muslim is for some individuals difficult. But I've actually noticed that my friends in Ethiopia who I've been on Zoom calls with now who are Christian, and they love to kiss. They kiss 3 times, 1, 2, 3. And I said to him, "Oh, my brother, it's so good to see you." And he goes, "Pastor Tyler, we're all doing that now, because we can't kiss." So know that just like Asian cultures have an okayness with masks, maybe someday Americans will be okay wearing masks. Maybe we'll be okay with some alternative ways of greeting people, because frankly, I shake so many hands on a Sunday morning. I go and scrub before I do anything else. And if I can do this a bit, that would be a blessing to me as well, and protect my own health. So feel free if you want to adapt that. I don't own it, but it feels good. You put it over your heart and it feels genuine.
Does anybody else have any questions for Tyler before we wrap up this morning?
I don't have a question, but I did want to mention when you were talking about some of the creative things that churches are doing, one of the coolest things that I have discovered, and hopefully everyone else is also, is churches are doing spontaneous and also worship in the middle of the day and posting it live on Facebook. And my stream, I see, and so at 10 o'clock, I know this church is doing a lot of worship. And for some reason, it's just better than Hillsong United when I got nothing else going on. So it's a pretty cool thing that I've watched some worship from 10 different churches in the area that I just, that blessed me to pieces. And so that's one of the things I thought was pretty cool about this new world of digital exploration. So.
Rusty, you brought up, just the nature of your position, and Ashley, if I can have a closing word with everyone too. I also note that please watch social media. We're going to be seeing some stuff come out from the source in Oaklawn shortly on training for anyone to identify child abuse in the community. One of the things that churches have been, I know that sometimes we get a bad rap in the press, but honestly, most churches are on the front line with teachers identifying places where there's abuse. And many of us have systems in place where we're identifying that if we see it in the Sunday school class or whatever. The reporting of child abuse in our community has dropped by more than 50%. And they're very concerned that it's actually gone up. We know that in times like this, it goes up. So just know that I think the source is putting together a training seminar soon for anyone. This is anyone like that serves food, that works in any capacity in the community can join in and have some training on that. I don't have the details yet, but is that correct, Ashley? We heard that the other day.
Yes, and I know that Marshall was working on posting that on our Facebook event page. So guys, make sure and check that out.
Yeah, and those of us who are connected directly to a faith community, there's going to be a really high need to make sure we get this out to our peers.
Absolutely. Well, Tyler, we really, really appreciate you joining us today and giving us some insight as to what all this looks like. It's always a joy just to see everybody's faces that are joining us every week. And we'll be here on Thursday talking with Nick Kiefer. Nick's got some amazing resources that he's going to bring to us on Thursday at 2 o'clock. So we're hoping that all of you will join us. Until then, I'm going to give you guys the heartfelt new way of saying hello and goodbye, since we can't hug. But again, appreciate you all joining us, and we look forward to seeing you guys hopefully on Thursday. Bye, guys.
Take care. Bye. Thank you for the opportunity.